On page 13, we'll look at leadership. And the question, is leadership a natural talent or can it be learned? Leadership requires one resource and three controls. The resource is family, and the controls are team building, experience, and temperaments. Good leadership is not only goal-oriented, it is people-oriented. Leadership is a team event in that you cannot exhibit leadership without followers. Leadership traits start with the family heritage and are passed down through the generations. For many years, the rule for leadership was, if it works for you, don't change it. This kind of thinking leads to the hit and miss condition, resulting in trial and error leadership that is learned through experience. One's temperament or behavioral traits will influence how you will apply leadership principles. We find that one's temperament is passed down through the heritage of the family. It's part of the DNA chain. On page 4, where we discussed heritage, we found that written into our DNA are the success and failures of past generations. These success and failures are waiting for an opportunity to reveal themselves in future generations. The leader has the opportunity to influence and change the DNA chain of future generations. People who are said to be born leaders have a predominant temperament of directing, which is one of the 4 parts of leadership. They feel comfortable at giving orders with their driving, action-oriented temperament. They are known for their ready, shoot, aim mindset. They draw the bullseye around where the bullet hit. Temperaments are a major influence on leadership. We'll take a closer look at them later. What do we know about man? In Genesis 1, verse 26, it says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." We find this to be the start of what is called God's chain of command. Verse 27 goes on to say, "So God created mankind in his own image." We find the first example of leadership in Genesis 2, verses 16 and 17, where God has given Adam a command. "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." Leadership is responsible to warn others of the dangers that they may face. God was warning Adam, "No, do not eat." No is the hardest word for man to obey. Which part of no do you not understand? The N or the O? Next we find in Genesis 2:18, "The Lord God said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him." And in Genesis 2, verse 22, we find, "Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man." In verse 24, we see that the man leaves father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. One flesh stands out here because at this point, sin has not entered the world. God sees Adam and Eve as equal parts of one unit. It's not until Genesis 3 that we find a change in the relationship between man and woman. In Genesis 3:11, we find the second leadership action. Leadership must confront when a directive is not carried out. We see that God went directly to the command that he had given. Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? In verse 13, God asked Eve directly, "What is this you have done?" You know the account of Adam and Eve's action and its result? If not, it's recorded in Genesis 3. Eve's failure to follow God's directions caused a change in the relationship. Genesis 3:16 tells us that your husband will rule over you. The chain of command and the role of leadership has now been set. God has made man the leader. We find in Ephesians 5:24, "Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything." Man, as the leader, has been given the responsibility for the care of the wife. For we see in the next verse, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her." Do you see the leadership in the chain of command in action? As the leader of the family, the father reports directly to God. His success or failure to follow God's commands rests completely on his shoulders. He is responsible for the safety and well-being of the family. As the family grows, leadership now becomes a team event where the chain of command delegates authority, yet cannot delegate responsibility. As the leader, the father needs to recognize that there are areas where the wife has better skills, and therefore she has the authority to make the decision. When the father is missing, it creates a void in the chain of command, and the mother of the family must assume the position and the responsibility for the success of the members in the family. It was not God's plan for the woman to have to carry the load of the family. Without leadership, each member is left to their own way and desires. They develop the attitude, "Don't tell me no." They never develop the discipline to overcome wrongful desires. They never learn the meaning of no. We see this happen in today's family without a father in the home. To have a successful family and a successful country, there must be team leadership in the home, and the father must take the lead role. As the leader of the family, the father reports directly to God. What are the leadership skills that the father must learn? By looking at examples of leadership in the Bible, we can learn what skills are needed. Take, for example, Moses, David, and Solomon. They stand out as successful leaders in the Bible. We'll first look at Moses, who led millions of Israelites out of Egypt as they moved towards the promised land of Canaan. We know that Moses was well educated by the Egyptian ruler, since he became the son of Pharaoh's daughter, as recorded in Exodus 2:10. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Then we find in verse 15 that Moses fled from the palace of Pharaoh to live in the desert for 40 years. God was preparing him for a leadership role. At this point, would we have considered him as a leader of Israel? We find the answer in Exodus 3, where God speaks to Moses in the burning bush. God tells Moses in Exodus 3:10, So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. The question is, does Moses sound like a potential leader from his response in verse 11? But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? We see God's reply in Exodus 3:12, where he says, And God said, I'll be with you. Moses then replies in Exodus 4:10 with this. Moses said to the Lord, Pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Then he goes on in verse 13. But Moses said, Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Does Moses' response to God sound like a natural-born leader? No. At this point, ask yourself, is this someone who I want to be my leader? I don't think so. All of this is to say, leadership can be learned when you put your trust and faith in God. I would venture to say that we all have felt like Moses from time to time. Yet the husband and father of the family must step up and learn how to be a leader. Leadership training starts by becoming aware of the behavioral traits of mankind. Scientific evaluation of man's behavior has been documented starting with the Greek physician Hippocrates. He classified man's behavior into 4 groups: the melancholy, also known as the analyzer; the phlegmatic, known as the planner; the sanguine, known as the coach or encourager; and the choleric, known as the action-orientated figure. Over the years, a number of studies have been done on why people act the way they do. The Myers-Briggs Foundation has even divided the 4 groups into 16 groups, and the Merle and Reed study uses a set of identifiers known as the analytical, amiable, expressive, and driver. A knowledge of all 4 traits is required before you can be an effective leader. All 4 temperaments are part of being a good leader. In part 2 of leadership, we'll start to look at how one learns to be the leader of the family. To view the Notebook on Life series, visit us on the web at www.christianvisualarts.com.